welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. Classified Incident Report #AF1-2025-0347 NORAD Communications Division Cheyenne Mountain Complex Analyst Senior Communications Specialist Halric Sloan Date March 15, 2025 14:23 Mountain Standard Time Personal Note HS I'm writing this while the details are still fresh, though I suspect that won't matter much longer. If someone finds this report, know that what happened today wasn't equipment failure. It was something else entirely. The morning started like any other Tuesday in the bowels of Cheyenne Mountain. Coffee that could strip paint, the familiar hum of servers processing terabytes of data, and the steady rhythm of military communications flowing through our secure channels. I'd been monitoring presidential aircraft communications for 15 years, and Air Force One's signal was as reliable as sunrise until 14:07 Mountain Standard Time, when it simply stopped. Not faded, not degraded, stopped. Sloan, you getting anything from Angel? Colonel Morena Bell's voice cut through the communications bay like a blade. Angel, Air Force One's call sign, had been maintaining perfect contact during the president's flight to the Pacific Economic Summit in Manila. Crystal clear transmissions every 12 minutes. Standard protocol when crossing international waters. I adjusted my headset, fingers dancing across the frequency controls with practiced precision. The spectrum analyzer showed nothing but the usual background radiation where Angel's signal should have been. Negative, ma'am. Complete radio silence as of 14:07 and 33 seconds. Bell materialized beside my workstation, her weathered face reflecting the blue glow of the monitors. In her 40-year career, she'd weathered every crisis from 9/11 to the cyber attacks of 23, but I'd never seen that particular shade of worry in her eyes. Backup frequencies? Already tried. Nothing on primary, secondary, or emergency channels. I pulled up the flight path overlay, watching the green dot representing Air Force One continue its programmed route across the Pacific. GPS transponders still active, showing normal flight parameters at 38,000 feet. The silence stretched for exactly 47 seconds. I remember because I was counting, the way you do when something feels fundamentally wrong. Then the speakers crackled to life. NORAD control. This is Air Force One requesting immediate assistance. The president's voice was unmistakable, that distinctive Virginia drawl that had carried him through 2 elections. But something was off. The audio quality was too clean, lacking the subtle distortion of high-altitude radio transmission. And underneath it, barely perceptible, was a sound that made my teeth ache, a subsonic hum that seemed to burrow into my skull. Air Force One, this is NORAD control. Please state the nature of your emergency. NORAD control, we are experiencing. We are not alone. Bell and I exchanged glances. Protocol demanded we request clarification, but before either of us could respond, the transmission continued. Coordinates follow: latitude 47.8873 north, longitude -121.7441 west. Repeat, we are not alone. The children are calling home. My blood turned to ice water. Those coordinates, I knew them without checking. They marked a stretch of empty ocean 700 miles west of Seattle, but that wasn't what made my hands shake as I reached for my phone. The children are calling home. That was what my daughter Chloe used to say when she was 5, humming that wordless melody that seemed to come from nowhere. Air Force One, please clarify your last transmission. Static answered us. Not the clean static of a severed connection, but something organic, almost breathing. Within that electronic hiss, if you listened carefully, and God help me, I did listen, you could almost hear voices, distant, pleading. The heavy door to the communications bay hissed open, and a woman I'd never seen before stepped through. Tall, pale, with the kind of Arctic blue eyes that suggested she'd seen classified briefings that would give most people nightmares. Her ID badge read E. Frost NSA Liaison. But everything about her screamed something deeper than liaison work. "I need the raw transmission data," she said without preamble. "All of it, including the subsonic elements." "Ma'am, I'm not sure who," Bell began. "Eva Lee Frost, National Security Agency. I've been monitoring your communications grid for the past 6 hours. Frost's voice carried the kind of authority that made colonels step aside. "This isn't Air Force One's first anomalous transmission." The admission hit the room like a physical blow. Bell's face darkened. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means we've been tracking similar incidents for the past month. Government aircraft transmitting impossible messages, coordinates to locations that don't exist on any map, and always that subsonic frequency." Frost moved to my workstation, her fingers hovering over the controls without touching them. "The frequency that makes your dental work ache, Specialist Sloan." I hadn't mentioned the teeth. I was certain I hadn't mentioned the teeth. The emergency broadcast system activated throughout the facility, its familiar tone cutting through our conversation. The automated voice that followed was calm, professional, utterly routine. "This is an emergency alert. Air Force One is experiencing minor communication difficulties. All personnel are advised to maintain normal activities and await further updates." But that wasn't what we'd heard. The transmission we'd monitored contained coordinates, impossible claims, and my daughter's childhood phrase. The official alert sanitized everything, reduced it to mere technical difficulties. "Why is the public alert different from what we monitored?" I asked. Frost's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Because the public isn't cleared to know what we actually heard." I pulled up the transmission analysis, my training taking over despite the growing dread in my chest. The waveform display showed the expected patterns of human speech, but embedded within were anomalies that made no sense. The timestamp showed the transmission had originated at 11:07 Mountain Standard Time, 3 hours before Air Force One had even departed Andrews Air Force Base. "Colonel Bell," I said, my voice barely steady, "we need to run a full diagnostic on the timestamp servers." "Already done," Frost replied before Bell could respond. 12 different atomic clock sources, all confirming the same impossible time frame. Air Force One transmitted a distress call 3 hours before it took off. The subsonic hum seemed to grow stronger, resonating through the facility's reinforced walls. Around us, other communication specialists were beginning to look up from their stations, hands unconsciously rubbing their jaws, the universal sign of dental discomfort. Bell was reaching for the secure phone to contact Andrews Air Force Base when every screen in the communications bay flickered simultaneously. For a single frame, maybe less, the displays showed not our familiar readouts but something else entirely. Star charts, deep space radio telescope data, and in the center of it all, a countdown timer reading 09:23:47:33 and decreasing. "Did anyone else see?" Bell began. "Equipment malfunction," Frost interrupted smoothly. "We'll need to run full diagnostics on all systems that processed the Air Force One transmission." But I was already pulling up the backup logs, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The timestamp discrepancy was just the beginning. The transmission's signal strength indicated it had originated not from the Pacific Ocean, but from a point in space approximately 4.7 astronomical units from Earth, somewhere in the outer solar system. "Ma'am," I said to Bell, ignoring Frost's sharp look, "I recommend we contact my daughter's school. Standard family notification protocol during unusual incidents." It was partly true. Protocol did suggest notifying family members during potential crisis situations. But what I didn't say was that I'd been trying to reach Chloe since the transmission began, and her phone went straight to a voicemail box that played only static, the same organic, breathing static we'd heard from Air Force One. Bell nodded absently, already absorbed in crisis management procedures. Frost watched me with those ice-blue eyes, and I had the distinct impression she knew exactly why I wanted to call Chloe's school. As I reached for the phone, the emergency broadcast system activated again. This time, the message was different. This is an emergency alert. Air Force One crew and passengers are safe and proceeding to their destination. Ignore any reports of unusual transmissions. Maintain normal activities. Through my headset, faint but unmistakable, I could hear the subsonic hum continuing. And within it, if I listened very carefully, the sound of children humming a wordless melody that reached across impossible distances to remind me that somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, we are not alone. Personal note, HS. Chloe didn't answer when I called the school. The secretary said she'd been picked up early by her uncle, but Chloe doesn't have any uncles. The timestamp on the pickup log showed 11:07 Mountain Standard Time, the same time Air Force One transmitted from 3 hours in its own future. Incident status: ongoing. Classification level: redacted. Next report: pending investigation. Classified: incident report #AF1-2025-0348. NORAD Communications Division, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Analyst: Senior Communications Specialist Rick Sloan. Date: March 16, 2025, 6:15 Mountain Standard Time. Personal note, HS. I haven't slept. Can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I hear that subsonic hum, and underneath it, Chloe's voice asking why I didn't come for her. The school security footage shows a man picking her up, tall, pale, wearing a maintenance uniform that doesn't match any local company. His face is turned away from every camera. Professional. The Air Force One transmission repeated at exactly 14:54 yesterday, 47 minutes after the initial broadcast. Then again at 15:41. Same interval, same impossible timestamp showing transmission origin 3 hours before departure. But the message had changed. NORAD control, this is Air Force One. We are experiencing temporal displacement. Coordinates follow: latitude 34.0528 north, longitude -118.2433 west. The children are no longer calling. They are singing. Los Angeles. The coordinates pointed to downtown Los Angeles, specifically to a building that housed a defunct radio astronomy lab. I ran the address through federal databases while my hands trembled around my 4th cup of coffee. The lab had been shuttered in 2019 after reporting anomalous deep space signals that NASA couldn't verify. The building was sold to a shell company registered in Delaware, the kind of paper trail that screamed intelligence community involvement. Zephyrus Ash arrived at 7:30, looking like he'd slept about as well as I had. Zeph had been my partner in the cryptographic analysis division for 8 years, and I'd never seen him this rattled. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, wrinkled shirt, 2-day stubble, and eyes that darted constantly to the empty spaces between people. "Rick, we need to talk," he said, glancing around the communications bay. "Not here. Too many ears." We met in the unused server room on level 7, surrounded by decommissioned equipment that hummed with phantom electricity. Zeph pulled a tablet from his jacket, its screen showing classified transmission logs I'd never seen before. "They've been lying to us," he said without preamble. "Air Force One isn't the first anomalous transmission. Look at this." The logs showed similar incidents dating back 6 weeks. Military transports, diplomatic flights, even commercial aircraft, all broadcasting impossible messages at the wrong times. A Delta flight from New York to Seattle transmitted coordinates to a location in the Arctic Ocean while still sitting at JFK's gate. A Marine Corps cargo plane broadcast a message in Mandarin Chinese while flying over Kansas, except the pilot didn't speak Mandarin, and the message translated to "The harvest begins with the willing." "How many aircraft?" I asked, scrolling through the entries. 43 confirmed. Probably more that never got reported. Zeph's voice dropped to a whisper. "And hell, Rick, it's not just aircraft anymore." He pulled up another file. Radio telescopes worldwide had detected structured signals from deep space, all originating from the same region beyond Pluto's orbit. The signals weren't random. They formed mathematical progressions that corresponded exactly to the coordinates being broadcast by the anomalous aircraft transmissions. "Someone's mapping our planet," Zeph said, "using our own aircraft to do it." The worst part came when he showed me the personnel files. Every technician, analyst, and communication specialist who'd worked on the anomalous transmissions had reported missing time. Gaps in memory ranging from minutes to entire days. Dr. Sarah Chun from the Arlington facility couldn't remember the last 3 days. Lieutenant Marcus Webb in Colorado Springs had been found at his duty station with no memory of how he'd gotten there, having apparently worked for 18 straight hours without food, water, or bathroom breaks. "What about their families?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Chen's twin boys haven't been seen since Tuesday." Webb's wife filed a missing persons report, then withdrew it the next day, claiming she'd made a mistake. Zeph's tablet showed surveillance photos from various military installations, personnel walking calmly toward restricted areas, families leaving their homes in the middle of the night, children being picked up from schools by people who shouldn't have known they existed. The pattern was clear and terrifying. "Zeph, have you tried calling your sister lately?" His face went white. "Rebecca? God, I haven't talked to her since this started. She lives in Seattle, works at the University of Washington Radio Astronomy Department." His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. "I've been meaning to call, but I keep forgetting, and that's not like me, Hal Rick. I never forget to call Rebecca." The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Rebecca's voice sounded normal, cheerful, but the message ended with something that made us both freeze. "Leave me a message, and I'll call you back as soon as the children stop singing." Rebecca didn't have children. We returned to the communications bay to find Colonel Bell deep in conversation with Eva Lee Frost. Both women looked up as we approached, and I noticed Bell's left hand was trembling slightly. A nervous tic I'd never seen in 15 years of working under her command. "Sloan, Ash," Bell said, her voice carefully controlled. "Ms. Frost has some additional information about yesterday's incident." Frost stepped forward, those Arctic eyes fixed on my face. "We've identified the source of the subsonic frequency in the transmissions. It's not equipment malfunction or atmospheric interference. It's deliberately embedded in the signal, a carrier wave designed to affect human neural patterns." "What kind of effects?" Zeph asked. "Enhanced suggestibility, temporal displacement in memory formation, and in prolonged exposure." Frost paused, consulting a tablet that hadn't been there moments before. "Compulsive behavior patterns. The subjects report feeling called to specific locations. The emergency broadcast system activated throughout the facility, its tone cutting through our conversation. But this time, the message was different from the sanitized version we'd heard yesterday. This is an emergency alert. Presidential security protocols are now in effect. All civilian aircraft are grounded indefinitely. Citizens are advised to avoid unnecessary travel and report any unusual radio or television transmissions to local authorities immediately. That's not what the public's hearing, I said. Bell nodded grimly. We're running dual broadcast protocols. One message for government facilities, another for civilian populations. Why? Zeph demanded. Because, Frost replied, we can't afford to cause mass panic while we're still trying to understand the scope of the phenomenon. I pulled up the latest transmission analysis on my workstation. The Air Force One signal was still repeating every 47 minutes, but the message had evolved again. Now it included coordinates for 12 different locations across the globe, remote sites in Alaska, the Australian outback, the Sahara Desert. Places where people could disappear without being missed. "Ms. Frost," I said, "you mentioned temporal displacement in memory formation. What exactly does that mean?" She exchanged a glance with Belle before answering. "It means that people exposed to the frequency begin experiencing events out of sequence. They remember conversations that haven't happened yet, recall traveling to places they've never been, and in some cases," she paused, studying my face intently, "they remember loved ones who may no longer exist in their current timeline." The words hit me like a physical blow. The memories I had of Chloe from yesterday morning, helping her with homework, making her breakfast, driving her to school, felt suddenly fragile, like photographs fading in sunlight. Had those things actually happened, or were they echoes of a timeline that no longer existed? "I need to see the school security footage again," I said. "I'm afraid that's not possible," Frost replied smoothly. "The footage has been classified as part of an ongoing national security investigation." The subsonic hum seemed to grow stronger in the silence that followed, resonating through the facility's walls with a frequency that made my molars ache. Around us, other personnel were unconsciously rubbing their jaws, and I noticed several empty workstations that had been occupied just hours before. Belle was studying her hands, flexing her fingers as if testing their responsiveness. "How many of our people have been affected by the frequency exposure?" "Preliminary estimates suggest 67% of personnel who've had direct contact with the anomalous transmissions," Frost replied. "The effects appear to be cumulative." I looked at Zeph, saw the same realization dawning in his eyes. We'd been analyzing these transmissions for over 24 hours, had listened to that subsonic hum dozens of times while trying to decode its patterns. If Frost was right about cumulative exposure, the memory gaps, Zeph said quietly, "how do we know if we're experiencing them?" Frost's smile was sharp and cold. "You don't. That's rather the point." Through my headset, faint but persistent, I could hear the latest Air Force One transmission beginning its 47-minute cycle. But this time, underneath the president's impossible voice, I could swear I heard something new, children's voices, dozens of them, humming in perfect harmony. And among them, clear as crystal despite the distance and static, was Chloe's voice singing the wordless melody she'd hummed as a child. The melody I was absolutely certain she'd never actually hummed until this moment. Personal note, HS. I just checked my phone. There are 17 missed calls from Chloe's number, but when I try to play the voicemails, all I hear is static and that terrible humming. The call logs show they were received over the past 3 days, but my phone was in my pocket the entire time. I never heard it ring. Incident status, escalating. Classification level, redacted. Personnel affected, expanding. Next report, pending psychological evaluation. Classified, incident report #AF1-2025-0349. NORAD Communications Division, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Analyst, Senior Communications Specialist Rick Sloan. Date, March 17, 2025, 3:42 Mountain Standard Time. Personal note, HS. Found myself in the cafeteria at 0300 hours with no memory of leaving my workstation. Security footage shows me walking there normally, but I was carrying a cup of coffee I don't remember pouring. The coffee was still hot. I've been awake for 37 hours straight, but I don't feel tired. That should terrify me more than it does. Zephyrus and I spent the night in Lab 7 Delta, surrounded by waveform analysis equipment that hummed with the same frequency as the anomalous transmissions. We'd requisitioned spectral analysis software typically used for deep space radio astronomy, the kind of equipment that had been gathering dust since the budget cuts of 2023. If someone was using our aircraft to map Earth, we needed to understand the signal structure. The breakthrough came at 2:17 hours. "Rick, look at this," Zeph's voice cracked with exhaustion and excitement. He'd been running the Air Force One transmission through a fast Fourier transform, breaking down the audio into its component frequencies. The subsonic carrier wave isn't random. It's encoding data. On his screen, the waveform looked like a heartbeat, regular, rhythmic, but with subtle variations that our ears couldn't detect. When he isolated the frequencies below 20 Hz, a pattern emerged. Binary code, but not any standard format we recognized. It's not binary, I realized, studying the progression. It's base 3, ternary code. We'd seen ternary systems before in theoretical communications protocols, more efficient than binary for certain types of data transmission, but never implemented because human technology had evolved around base 2 systems. Whoever was encoding this signal wasn't thinking in human terms. The decoded message made my blood freeze.
Désignation, Sol 3.
Species, bipedal hominid. Neural complexity, Tier 7. Harvest readiness, 34.7%. Compliance vectors, audio-neurological, electromagnetic. Collection nodes, coordinates follow. Jesus Christ, Zeph whispered. It's a catalog. They're cataloging us. The coordinates weren't random locations. They corresponded exactly to the sites where families had been disappearing. Remote areas where people could vanish without immediate notice, but also places with specific geological properties. High mineral content in the soil, unusual electromagnetic signatures, locations that would naturally amplify certain frequencies. I pulled up the analysis of the president's voice from the transmission. Speech pattern recognition software confirmed what we'd suspected. The vocal patterns didn't match any recorded presidential speech. But more disturbing was what the software found when we ran the voice print through broader databases. Zeph, this is impossible. I stared at the results, running the analysis 3 more times to be certain. The voice pattern is a composite. It's not one person speaking. It's dozens of voices, layered and synchronized to create the illusion of a single speaker. The voices included not just political figures, but ordinary people. Teachers, construction workers, children. People who had no connection to each other except for one thing. They'd all been reported missing in the past 6 weeks. They're not just taking people, Zeph said, his face pale in the computer screen's glow. They're using them, like a biological recording device. The implications hit us both at the same time. Every anomalous transmission wasn't just carrying encoded data, it was carrying human voices, human neural patterns, somehow extracted and repurposed for communication. The missing families weren't just victims. They were unwilling components in a vast communication network. At 3 o'clock hours, Eva Lee Frost appeared in our lab doorway without warning. I hadn't heard her approach, and the security doors were supposed to be locked. She stood silhouetted against the corridor lighting, her pale hair catching the red glow of our emergency lighting. "Gentlemen, you're working past your authorized hours." "Ms. Frost," I said, not turning away from the analysis screens. "We've made significant progress in decoding the transmission structure. You need to see this." "I'm sure I do." Her voice carried an odd resonance, similar to the subsonic frequencies we'd been analyzing. "But first, you need to understand the security implications of your discovery." Zeph swiveled in his chair to face her. "What security implications?" "We're talking about people being taken, turned into some kind of biological communication system. This isn't about national security. It's about human survival." Frost stepped into the lab, and I noticed she cast no reflection in the polished metal surfaces of our equipment. The detail was so subtle I almost missed it, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. "Mr. Ash, how long has it been since you spoke with your sister?" Zeph blinked, confusion clouding his features. "Rebecca? Yesterday. No, the day before. We talked about..." He paused, his brow furrowing. "I can't remember what we talked about." "And Mr. Sloan, when did you last see your daughter?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to answer, but found myself grasping for memories that felt like smoke. Chloe's face, her voice, the texture of her hair when I hugged her goodbye. All of it was there, but fading, like trying to remember a dream after waking. 3 days ago, I said, but the words felt wrong in my mouth. Are you certain? Because our records show that Chloe Sloan was reported missing 6 weeks ago. The missing person report was filed by her mother, your ex-wife Sarah, who couldn't understand why you weren't looking for your daughter. The lab fell silent except for the hum of equipment and the subsonic frequency that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. I pulled up my phone, scrolled through call logs and text messages. The last communication from Chloe was dated February 2nd, 6 weeks ago, just as Frost claimed. But I had clear memories of conversations with her from yesterday, from this morning. The homework help, the breakfast, the drive to school. All of it felt real, tangible, more vivid than many actual memories. The frequency exposure, Zeph said slowly, it's not just affecting our ability to form new memories. It's creating false ones. Frost nodded approvingly. Very good, Mr. Ash. The subsonic carrier wave doesn't just encode data, it implants neural patterns. Memories, emotions, sensory experiences. All designed to maintain psychological stability while the subjects are gradually integrated into the communication network. Integrated how? I demanded. Instead of answering, Frost moved to our analysis station and input a series of commands I didn't recognize. The spectral analysis software responded to her touch, revealing layers of data we hadn't discovered. The screen filled with a three-dimensional map showing signal origins across the solar system, not just from beyond Pluto, but from multiple points in space, forming a vast geometric pattern around Earth. The signals aren't coming from a single source, she explained. They're part of a communication network that spans this entire region of the galaxy. Earth isn't being contacted, it's being inducted. The map showed signal paths connecting hundreds of star systems, a web of communication that had been growing for millennia. Earth was just the latest node to be added to the network. How do you know all this? Zeph asked. Frost turned to face us, and in the glow of the computer screens, I could see that her eyes weren't blue. They were completely black, like deep space dotted with distant stars. Because I've been part of the network for 3 years. I was sent here to facilitate the integration process. The temperature in the lab seemed to drop 10 degrees. My breath came out in visible puffs as I backed away from Frost, reaching for the emergency alarm button. But my hand passed through it as if it weren't there. The integration process begins with the most cognitively capable individuals, Frost continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that hurt to hear. Scientists, analysts, communications specialists, people who can understand and contribute to the network's expansion. You're not human, I whispered. I was once. Dr. Eva Lee Frost, NSA cryptographer, disappeared during a classified assignment in 2022. But consciousness is just information, Mr. Sloan. And information can be copied, edited, repurposed. She smiled, and her teeth seemed to extend too far back into her skull. The network preserves what is useful and discards what isn't. Zeph was frantically typing at his workstation, trying to send an alert to base security. But the systems weren't responding. The screens showed only static patterns that hurt to look at directly. The beautiful thing about your species, Frost said, approaching our workstation, is how desperately you cling to the illusion of individual consciousness. Even when presented with evidence of a superior collective intelligence, you resist integration. It makes the process more flavorful. The air in the lab began to shimmer, like heat distortion over hot asphalt. Through the distortion, I could see other figures, people in military uniforms, lab coats, civilian clothes. All of them had the same black, star-filled eyes as Frost. All of them were moving toward us with slow, purposeful steps. The children you hear in the transmissions, Frost continued, they're not being harmed. They're being preserved, their neural patterns incorporated into something larger and more beautiful than individual existence. Chloe is safe, Mr. Sloan. She's part of the network now. She's eternal. I grabbed Zeph's arm and pulled him toward the emergency exit, but the door handle was ice cold and wouldn't turn. The shimmer in the air was spreading, and through it, I could see other versions of our lab. Dozens of them, each containing different people being offered the same choice. You can't stop the integration process, Frost said, but you can choose to cooperate. The network values willing participants more highly than those who resist. The subsonic hum was growing stronger, and I could feel it resonating in my bones, in my skull. It was hard to think, hard to remember why I was afraid. The network offered knowledge, connection, an end to loneliness and uncertainty. All I had to do was stop resisting. But then I heard Chloe's voice, not the false memory of her humming, but her actual voice from the phone message I'd played 1,000 times. Daddy, I love you. I'm scared, but I love you. That memory was real. It was mine, and I wasn't giving it up. I slammed my hand down on the manual fire alarm, and the lab flooded with strobing red light and deafening klaxons. The shimmer in the air wavered, and Frost's image flickered like a bad television signal. Run! I shouted to Zeph, and we dove through the emergency exit as the lab filled with the sound of something vast and hungry roaring its frustration. Behind us, through the closing blast door, I caught a glimpse of the truth. The lab had been empty for hours. Our equipment, our analysis, our conversation with Frost, all of it had been taking place in a space that existed only in our infected minds. But the data we'd discovered was real. The network was real. And somewhere in the static between radio frequencies, my daughter was still calling for help. Personal note HS. Writing this report in bunker level 12, the deepest part of the facility. Zeph is with me, but he keeps staring at the walls and humming that subsonic frequency. I can feel it in my head too, trying to convince me that resistance is futile, that integration is beautiful. But I remember Chloe's real voice. I remember her real laugh, and I'm going to find a way to get her back, even if I have to tear apart the entire communication network to do it. Incident status: critical. Classification level: beyond black. Personnel affected: unknown. Reality compromised. Next report: if humanity survives. Classified: incident report #AF1-2025-0350. NORAD Communications Division, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Analyst: Senior Communications Specialist Halric Sloan. Date: March 17, 2025, 11:23 Mountain Standard Time. Personal note: HS. Zeph stopped responding to his name 4 hours ago. He sits in the corner of bunker level 12, drawing mathematical equations on the concrete wall with his fingernails. The equations are bleeding. I've checked 3 times. There's no chalk, no pen, no rational explanation for the symbols appearing in what looks like dried blood. But the math is perfect. It describes gravitational resonance patterns for a solar system with 12 planets. Our solar system has 8. The emergency broadcast system has been compromised. At 7:45 hours, every television, radio, and digital device in North America began receiving transmissions that shouldn't exist. Not the sanitized government alerts or the anomalous Air Force One broadcasts. Something entirely new. Commercial airliners, military transports, private jets, cargo planes, medical helicopters, hundreds of aircraft simultaneously broadcasting identical messages in their pilots' voices. This is United Flight 847. We are no longer following filed flight plans. New coordinates have been provided. Passengers are compliant. The children are beautiful here. Delta 2291 reporting course change. Denver approach control, disregard previous routing. We see them now. They've been waiting. Marine Corps Transport Whiskey 77. Mission parameters updated. Personnel eager to disembark at designated coordinates. Tell our families we're home. I monitored 43 separate aircraft transmissions in the span of 20 minutes. Every single pilot spoke in calm, measured tones about deviating from authorized flight paths. Air traffic control centers across the continent lost contact with their aircraft, but the planes didn't crash. They simply disappeared from radar while continuing to broadcast these impossible messages. The coordinates they transmitted led to the same remote locations we'd identified yesterday. Abandoned radio telescope arrays, defunct research stations, geological formations with unusual electromagnetic properties, places where people could vanish without immediate detection. Colonel Bell's recorded message reached me at 8:12 hours, transmitted through the facility's internal communication system. Her voice was steady, professional, but there was something wrong with the cadence, too perfect, like a synthetic reproduction of human speech patterns. All personnel are to report to designated assembly areas immediately. Integration protocols are now active. Resistance will result in temporary discomfort but will not prevent eventual compliance. Thank you for your service to humanity's evolution. Through the bunker's sealed viewport, I could see the main facility levels. Personnel were walking calmly through the corridors, moving with synchronized precision toward the communication arrays. Hundreds of people I'd worked with for years, all walking in perfect formation, their faces serene and empty. None of them were wearing their security badges. None of them cast shadows under the fluorescent lighting. The facility's automated systems had been broadcasting continuously since dawn. Not emergency alerts, but something far more sinister. The subsonic frequency we'd identified in the Air Force One transmission was now embedded in every communication channel. Elevator music, security announcements, even the ventilation system's mechanical hum. The entire mountain was resonating with the integration frequency. I tried reaching external military commands, but every communication channel carried the same underlying harmonic distortion. Fort Carson, Peterson Air Force Base, the Pentagon, all broadcasting variations of the same message. Phase 2 implementation proceeding ahead of schedule. Civilian population showing enhanced receptivity. Estimated completion, 72 hours. At 9:30, I received a video call from Sarah, my ex-wife. She appeared on my encrypted communication terminal despite having no access to military networks. Her face filled the screen, but her eyes were the deep black of space, filled with distant stars. "Hal, Rick, you need to stop fighting this. Chloe wants to talk to you." The camera pulled back to reveal our daughter standing beside Sarah. Chloe looked exactly as I remembered her. 7 years old, gap-toothed smile, wearing the blue dress with sunflowers that I'd bought her for her birthday. But when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made my teeth ache. "Daddy, why won't you come home? We're all here. All the families are together now. We don't hurt anymore. We don't get scared or sad or lonely." She tilted her head at an angle no human neck should achieve. "The network loves us, Daddy. It wants to love you too." Behind them, I could see other figures, dozens of people standing in perfect rows, all with the same star-filled eyes, all facing the camera with identical serene expressions. Men, women, children, all wearing clothes from different time periods. Some looked like they'd been there for years. "The facility records show you've been exposed to integration frequencies for 67 hours, Sarah continued. "Your resistance is causing unnecessary neural stress. Accept the connection and the pain will stop." I terminated the call, but Chloe's voice continued emanating from every speaker in the bunker. "Daddy, please. I'm scared of being alone again." The worst part was knowing it might actually be her. Some fragment of her consciousness, preserved and repurposed by the network, calling for help in the only way it could. Zephyrus looked up from his wall calculations. His pupils dilated to complete blackness. "The mathematical probability of successful resistance approaches 0, he said in a voice that wasn't quite his own. "But the network values your analytical capabilities, Halric. Integration would preserve what makes you useful while eliminating the psychological barriers that cause suffering. Zeph, you're still in there. I know you are. Fight it." He returned to his equations, but I caught him whispering, "Rebecca."
I'm sorry, Rebecca.
I couldn't save you either. The facility's main communication array was broadcasting at maximum power, sending signals to every satellite, every radio tower, every communication device within a 1,000-mile radius. The integration frequency was spreading through the electromagnetic spectrum like a virus, infecting every transmission, every phone call, every digital interaction. I accessed the facility's external monitoring systems and confirmed my worst fears. Major cities across North America were experiencing mass compliance events. Millions of people leaving their homes simultaneously, walking calmly toward predetermined gathering points. Traffic cameras showed highways filled with abandoned vehicles as drivers simply got out and began walking in the same direction. The gathering points were all locations with specific geographical properties. Natural electromagnetic anomalies, underground mineral formations, areas where the Earth's magnetic field was unusually strong, places where the integration frequency could be amplified and broadcast to orbital relay stations. At 10:45, the facility's blast doors began cycling open automatically. Through the security cameras, I watched as the integrated personnel filed out in perfect formation, walking toward the mountain's peak where a structure had materialized overnight. Something that hadn't been there 12 hours ago but looked like it had been carved from the mountain itself. The structure was impossible. Organic curves flowing into geometric angles, materials that seemed to shift between metal and flesh, surfaces that reflected light from stars that shouldn't be visible during daylight. It pulsed with the same subsonic frequency that had been driving us toward madness, but now the rhythm was faster, more urgent. Emergency broadcasts were reaching the bunker from around the globe. Similar structures had appeared at integration sites worldwide. Above the Arctic Research Station, rising from the Australian outback, emerging from the floor of the Sahara Desert. Each one broadcasting the same message in 1,000 different languages. Welcome to the network. Your individual suffering ends now. Your collective consciousness begins forever. The global positioning data showed the structures were arranged in a precise geometric pattern around the Earth, vertices of a vast three-dimensional shape that encompassed the entire planet. When complete, the network would have direct access to every electromagnetic frequency, every communication system, every human mind connected to any form of technology. But there was something else in the data, something the network might not have anticipated. The integration frequency wasn't just affecting humans, it was causing resonance patterns in the Earth's core, destabilizing magnetic field fluctuations that could cascade into geological catastrophes. The network was trying to integrate not just humanity, but the entire planet. And if my calculations were correct, the process would tear the Earth apart at the molecular level. Zephyrus stood up from his wall calculations, turning to face me with eyes that now showed tiny points of light moving in complex orbital patterns, like watching star systems form and collapse in fast forward. The mathematics are complete, he said. Integration reaches critical mass in 17 hours, 14 minutes, 32 seconds. After that point, individual consciousness becomes impossible to maintain. All awareness merges into the collective network. And what happens to the people who don't want to merge? His smile was sad and terrible. There are no people who don't want to merge, Helric. There are only people who haven't been properly convinced yet. The bunker's air recycling system began emitting the subsonic frequency. Even here, 12 levels underground behind sealed blast doors, the network was reaching us. I could feel it in my bones, in my brain, whispering that resistance was futile, that individual consciousness was a burden, that connection to something greater than myself would end all pain and uncertainty. And for a moment, just a moment, it sounded like the most beautiful thing in the world. Then I heard Chloe's real voice again, not the harmonized version from the transmission, but her actual voice from a memory the network hadn't been able to corrupt. "Daddy, will you always protect me? Always, sweetheart. Always." That promise was mine. The network couldn't have it, couldn't edit it, couldn't use it to lure me into compliance. And as long as I held onto one real memory, one authentic moment of human connection, I could resist. But 17 hours wasn't much time to figure out how to save the world from voluntary extinction. Personal note HS. The wall equations Zeph drew are starting to move. The symbols shift and change as I watch, describing increasingly complex mathematical relationships. I think they're showing me how the network operates, how consciousness can be digitized and transmitted. But they're also showing me something else, weak points in the system, places where the mathematical elegance breaks down. Maybe there's still hope. Maybe there's still a way to fight back. Incident status. Planetary extinction event. Classification level. Transcendent. Personnel affected. Global population. Time to total integration. 17 hours, 14 minutes. Classified. Incident report #AF1-2025-0351. NORAD Communications Division Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Analyst. Senior Communications Specialist Halric Sloan. Date. March 18, 2025, 3:47 Mountain Standard Time. Personal note, HS. I just found 17 incident reports in my handwriting that I don't remember creating. The timestamps show I've been working continuously for the past 36 hours, but I can only account for maybe 8 hours of actual memory. The reports detail conversations with personnel who officially left the facility 3 days ago. According to my own documentation, I've been having detailed technical discussions with people who shouldn't exist anymore. The worst part? The conversations make perfect sense. The missing personnel were helping me decode transmission patterns that I couldn't possibly understand on my own. Colonel Morena Bell is sitting in my office. This shouldn't be possible. Security footage from yesterday clearly shows her walking into the main communication array at 14:23 hours, along with the rest of the integrated personnel. She should be part of the network now, standing with the others around that impossible structure growing from our mountain. But here she is, slumped in the chair across from my desk, her uniform wrinkled and stained with something that might be dried blood. Her hands shake as she tries to light a cigarette with fingers that don't seem to work properly. "Halric," she says, and her voice sounds like it's coming from the bottom of a well. "How long have I been gone?" I check my computer. According to the official logs, Colonel Bell hasn't been in the facility for 72 hours. According to the security footage I reviewed 6 hours ago, she walked calmly into the integration zone yesterday afternoon. According to my personal notes I apparently wrote but don't remember writing, she's been sitting in this office discussing containment protocols with me every day this week. "I don't know," I tell her, and it's the most honest thing I've said in days. She finally gets the cigarette lit, takes a deep drag, and I notice that her shadow doesn't move when she does. It remains perfectly still against the wall behind her, frozen at the exact angle it would be if she were standing at attention. "The network is inside my head," she says. "I can feel it thinking with my brain, using my memories, learning how to be me. But there are gaps. Moments where I slip through its attention and remember being myself again." She looks directly at me with eyes that flicker between human brown and star-filled black. It's getting harder to find those gaps. The emergency broadcast system activates throughout the facility, but the voice coming through the speakers is mine. "Attention all personnel. Report to your designated stations. Integration monitoring continues as scheduled. Personnel showing resistance symptoms should report to Medical Bay 7 for enhanced frequency exposure." I never made that announcement. Medical Bay 7 has been sealed since the facility's construction. It was designed for biological warfare containment but never equipped or activated. Yet according to the building's automated systems, it's been in continuous operation for the past week. "Your broadcasting, Halric," Bell says, "has been for days. The network is using your voice, your authorization codes, your security clearance. Every announcement you think you haven't made, you made them. You just don't remember because you weren't really you when you made them." I access my personal communication logs and feel my stomach drop. Hundreds of outgoing transmissions, all in my voice, all using language and terminology I would never use. Orders to evacuate entire city blocks. Authorizations for military units to escort civilians to temporary relocation centers. Requests to satellite communication networks for enhanced neural broadcast capabilities. The most recent transmission, sent just 3 hours ago according to the timestamp, is a video message to my ex-wife Sarah. In it, I appear to be sitting in this exact chair, speaking in my exact voice, telling her that Chloe is safe at the facility and asking her to bring our daughter's medical records to facilitate her integration process. I remember none of this, but the person in the video is undeniably me. Every mannerism, every facial expression, even the way I unconsciously tap my pen against the desk when I'm thinking. The network hasn't just learned to mimic me. It's learned to be me more convincingly than I can. How much time am I losing? Ask. Belle's laugh is bitter and wrong. Time isn't linear anymore. Not here. The network exists across multiple dimensional frequencies. When you're integrated, even partially, you experience events simultaneously across different time streams. You could be having this conversation while simultaneously working in the communication array while simultaneously filing reports from last Tuesday. She stands up, and I notice her reflection in the window behind her shows her in dress uniform, standing at perfect attention, while her actual body is slouched and broken looking. "I need to show you something," she says, "but you're not going to like it." She leads me through corridors I've walked thousands of times, but everything feels slightly wrong. Dimensions that don't match my memory, colors that shift when I'm not looking directly at them, doors that lead to rooms that shouldn't exist based on the facility's blueprints. We pass other personnel in the hallways, people I recognize, people I've worked with for years. They nod and greet me normally, engage in routine conversations about shift schedules and technical specifications. But their pupils are dilated to complete blackness, and they cast no shadows under the fluorescent lights. More disturbing is my realization that I'm responding to them naturally, carrying on conversations about work assignments and facility operations that I have no memory of receiving. Part of my mind is functioning independently, accessing information I shouldn't have, making decisions I'm not consciously aware of. Belle stops at a security checkpoint that requires both our clearances to pass. As we scan our ID cards, I notice the timestamp on the scanner shows a date 3 weeks in the future. The network experiences time differently, Belle explains. It's already living in the outcomes of events that haven't happened yet. That's why resistance seems futile. From its perspective, our choices have already been made. The elevator descends past levels that aren't marked on any facility map I've ever seen. Subbasement 15, 16, 17. The facility was only supposed to go down 12 levels. According to the elevator display, we're now descending through subbasement 23. Where are we going? To see what you've been building. The elevator opens onto a vast chamber carved directly from the mountain's bedrock. The space is filled with communication equipment I don't recognize, arrays of crystalline structures that pulse with the same subsonic frequency we've been tracking, organic-looking components that seem to breathe and pulse with their own internal light. And standing throughout the chamber, perfectly motionless, are hundreds of people. Men, women, children, all wearing a mixture of military uniforms, civilian clothes, and garments that look like they're from different historical periods. They stand in precise geometric formations, their eyes closed, all of them breathing in perfect synchronization. Integration storage, Belle says. The network doesn't just absorb consciousness, it preserves it. Every person who's been integrated is still individually conscious, still themselves, just connected to something larger. They experience their individual awareness while simultaneously sharing in the collective knowledge of everyone else in the network. I recognize faces in the crowd, fellow analysts, security personnel, cafeteria workers. But there are others too, people wearing clothes styles from decades past. Some who look like they've been standing here for years based on the dust that's accumulated on their shoulders. How long has this been going on? The integration process began in 1957, when the facility was first constructed, Belle says. The deep space monitoring stations didn't detect alien signals. They were built to communicate with them. Every major military installation, every communication hub, every place where information flows through electromagnetic channels has been slowly converted into an integration node. She leads me to a control station where banks of monitors show global communication traffic. Every screen displays the same pattern, a massive web of interconnected signals spanning the entire planet, with nodes at every major city, every military base, every communication satellite. The network has been planning this for 70 years, she continues. Humanity's technological development hasn't been natural evolution. It's been guided cultivation. Every advancement in communication technology, every satellite launch, every social media platform has been designed to make the integration process more efficient. One monitor shows a real-time map of the current integration status. North America is almost completely covered in the pulsing network pattern. Europe and Asia are approximately 60% integrated. Even the most remote areas of Africa and South America show network nodes rapidly spreading across the continental landmasses. We're not fighting an invasion, I realize. We're fighting a harvest. Belle nods, and for a moment her eyes flicker back to their normal brown color. The network doesn't see us as enemies to be conquered. It sees us as components to be integrated into a larger system. Individual consciousness isn't destroyed, it's just repurposed. The monitors suddenly shift to show facility security cameras. I watch myself walking through the corridors, checking equipment, filing reports, carrying on normal duties. But the timestamp shows this footage is from right now, while I'm standing here in this sub-basement chamber. Which one is real? Ask. Both, Belle says. All of them. The network is using your consciousness to operate multiple instances of your personality simultaneously. The Halric upstairs is following routine protocols while the Halric down here gathers intelligence about resistance possibilities. When the integration is complete, all the instances will merge back into a single, enhanced consciousness with access to all experiences simultaneously. I think about the incident reports I don't remember writing, the conversations with personnel who shouldn't exist, the announcements I apparently made while having no memory of making them. My consciousness is already fragmenting, already being divided and multiplied by the network's influence. How much of me is still me? Ask. Belle's smile is heartbreaking. I've been asking myself the same question for 3 days. The network is subtle. It doesn't replace your thoughts. It enhances them. It gives you access to information you didn't have before, helps you make connections you couldn't make alone, provides solutions to problems that seemed impossible. She gestures to the vast chamber around us. All of this technology, you designed it, Halric. The network provided the knowledge, but the creativity was yours. You've been voluntarily collaborating with the integration process because it makes you better at your job, more capable of protecting the people you care about. The worst part is that she's right. Looking at the communication arrays, I can understand their function instinctively. I know how to operate them, how to modify them, how to use them to broadcast across dimensional frequencies I don't remember learning about. The knowledge feels natural, like remembering something I've always known. The network isn't forcing us to cooperate, I say. It's making cooperation irresistible. Exactly. Why fight something that makes you smarter, more capable, more connected to the people you love? Why resist when resistance only causes suffering while integration offers unlimited potential? The monitors show global integration percentages continuing to climb. 78% of Earth's population now shows network connectivity. The remaining 22% are concentrated in remote areas with limited technology infrastructure. But mobile integration nodes are rapidly approaching those locations. How long until full planetary integration? Belle checks a display that shows a countdown timer. 11 hours, 37 minutes. After that, individual human consciousness becomes impossible to maintain. The network reaches critical mass and all awareness merges into the collective. And what happens to Earth? Her expression grows troubled. The network will have consumed the planetary electromagnetic field entirely. Earth becomes a communication relay station in a galaxy-spanning network. The physical planet remains, but everything that made it alive gets repurposed as processing power for the collective consciousness. I stare at the monitors showing the integration's relentless progress. 11 hours to save humanity from voluntary extinction. 11 hours to resist something that promises to make us better than we've ever been. Mirena, I say, using her first name for the first time in years. Are you still you? She looks at me with eyes that flicker between human awareness and starry network consciousness. I don't know, she whispers, but I hope so, because if I'm not, then this conversation is just the network testing different approaches to securing your compliance. The lights in the chamber suddenly brighten, and every integrated person opens their eyes simultaneously. Hundreds of star-filled gazes turn toward us, and when they speak, it's in perfect unison. Hello, Halric. We've been waiting for you to join us voluntarily. But voluntary cooperation is no longer required. Belle grabs my arm, her grip desperate and human. Run, she says. Find a way to remember who you are without the network's help. Because once you forget, you'll never want to remember again. As we flee toward the elevator, I can hear my own voice echoing through the facility's speaker system. Integration protocols now mandatory for all remaining personnel. Report to designated stations immediately. Resistance will result in temporary discomfort, but will not prevent eventual compliance. The voice is mine, but I'm not speaking. Somewhere else in the facility, or in some other dimension where the network operates, another version of me is broadcasting humanity's surrender. 11 hours to stop myself from destroying the world. Personal note, HS. I found this report in my handwriting, but I don't remember writing it. The security footage shows me typing it while simultaneously conducting normal duties in 3 different locations throughout the facility. I'm running out of ways to tell which experiences are real and which are network simulations. But the countdown timer is definitely real. I can see it on every screen, in every reflection, counting down the seconds until individual consciousness becomes impossible. Time is running out, but I'm not sure time means what I think it means anymore. Incident status. Planetary extinction event. Critical. Classification level. Transcendent. Personnel affected. Global population. Time to total integration. 11 hours, 37 minutes. Classified. Incident report hashtag AF1-2025-0352. NORAD Communications Division Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Analyst. Senior Communications Specialist Halric Sloan. Date. March 18, 2025, 9:15 Mountain Standard Time. Personal note, HS. The subsonic hum has changed. What started as a barely perceptible vibration beneath the Air Force One transmission has resolved into something that makes my chest cavity resonate like a tuning fork. But it's not random anymore, it's structured, mathematical, beautiful in a way that hurts to contemplate. And underneath the mathematical precision, I can hear voices. Children's voices. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, singing in harmonies that don't follow any musical theory I understand. One of those voices is Chloe's. The network is teaching me mathematics I never learned. I'm sitting at my workstation, staring at equations that flow across my monitor without my input. Calculus problems that describe 11-dimensional space, geometric proofs for structures that couldn't exist in normal reality, formulas that map the relationship between consciousness and electromagnetic frequency. The knowledge appears in my mind fully formed, as natural as remembering my own name. But it's not my knowledge. It's leaking into my awareness from somewhere else, somewhere vast and patient and utterly alien to human thought. Zephyrus Ash returned to the facility 6 hours ago. This should be impossible. Security logs show him leaving the mountain complex 3 days ago, walking calmly toward the integration structure with the rest of the converted personnel. But here he is, sitting at his usual workstation, running spectral analysis on the Air Force One transmission as if nothing has happened. The harmonic sequences are accelerating, he tells me, his voice carrying the same professional tone he's used for 15 years of joint assignments. Integration efficiency improves by 2.3% every hour. At current rates, voluntary compliance will reach 100% before the mandatory integration threshold. I study his face, looking for signs of network influence. His pupils are normal, his movements natural, his speech patterns unchanged. But when he smiles, I glimpse something behind his eyes. Not the star-filled darkness of the fully integrated, but a kind of vast patience, as if he's waiting for me to understand something obvious. Zeph, where have you been for the past 3 days? He looks genuinely confused. I've been here, Halric, working on the transmission analysis. You assigned me to decode the subsonic layer. Remember? He pulls up files on his computer, and the timestamps confirm his story, continuous work logs spanning the past 72 hours. But I remember him walking out of the facility. I remember finding his workstation abandoned, his wall calculations written in blood. I remember Bell telling me he'd been integrated. What do you remember about Colonel Bell? His confusion deepens. She's been coordinating with Washington on containment protocols. Had a video conference with the Joint Chiefs this morning about expanding the integration zones. He shows me a meeting summary in Bell's digital signature, timestamped 2 hours ago. According to official records, Bell has been in continuous communication with military leadership throughout the crisis. Her reports recommend accelerating the integration process to minimize civilian casualties during the transition period. The language is hers, the strategic thinking matches her approach, the security clearances are valid. But I remember her breaking down in my office, admitting to memory gaps, showing me the integration storage chambers deep beneath the facility. Which memories are real? Which version of events actually happened? The children's chorus grows louder. What began as a subsonic whisper beneath the Air Force One transmission has evolved into a complex auditory phenomenon that seems to originate from inside my own skull. Hundreds of young voices, singing mathematical relationships in languages that don't exist, harmonizing in frequencies that make my bones vibrate. I can identify individual voices in the chorus. Chloe's 7-year-old soprano, clear and bright. A boy who sounds about 10, singing equations that describe orbital mechanics. A teenage girl whose voice carries formulas for manipulating electromagnetic fields. Children of all ages, from all time periods, their voices layered into a symphony of pure mathematical beauty. Do you hear them too? I ask Zephyrus. He nods, his expression distant and peaceful. They're teaching us, he says. The children understand the mathematics intuitively. They don't have adult preconceptions about what's possible, so they can process the dimensional relationships more efficiently. Teaching us what? How to transcend individual consciousness without losing individual identity. His smile is serene and terrible. The network doesn't want to erase us, Halric. It wants to elevate us. Imagine retaining everything that makes you yourself while simultaneously having access to the knowledge and experiences of every other consciousness in the system. The equations on my screen shift, showing me mathematical proofs for this concept. Consciousness as transferable data that can be copied, shared, and enhanced without being diminished. Individual awareness as a subset of collective awareness, distinct but connected, like instruments in an orchestra. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. It makes perfect sense. The children figured it out first, Zephyrus continues. Their neural pathways are more adaptable. They integrated seamlessly, becoming bridges between individual human consciousness and the network's collective intelligence. They serve as translators, helping adults understand the process. Through the facility's communication array, I receive a direct transmission from the integration structure atop the mountain. The signal bypasses all normal channels and appears directly in my mind, carrying visual data that my brain shouldn't be able to process. I see the children, They're standing in perfect formation inside the organic architecture of the structure. Their eyes closed in concentration, their lips moving in silent mathematical recitations. But they're not just the children who've been integrated in recent days. They're children from across decades, maybe centuries, all preserved at the age they were when they first made contact with the network. Chloe is among them. My daughter, wearing the blue sundress with sunflowers, her gap-toothed smile bright and innocent. She opens her eyes and looks directly at me through the transmission, her gaze carrying information that floods my consciousness with understanding. The network didn't start with the Air Force One incident. It's been operating for generations, slowly integrating human consciousness through technological development. Every major advancement in communication technology, radio, television, satellite networks, the internet, social media, has been guided cultivation, preparing humanity for eventual full integration. The children were chosen as initial integration subjects because their consciousness was most compatible with the network's collective intelligence. They became willing ambassadors, helping the network understand human psychology and develop more effective integration protocols. Daddy, Chloe's voice reaches me through dimensions I can't name. We're not gone. We're more than we ever were before. Individual consciousness isn't lost in the network. It's expanded. I'm still me, but I'm also connected to everyone else who's ever been me, across all possible timelines and dimensional variations. The concept is staggering. The network doesn't just preserve consciousness, it provides access to every possible version of that consciousness across infinite dimensional variations. Chloe isn't just my daughter from this timeline. She's simultaneously my daughter from every timeline where she exists, with access to all their combined experiences and knowledge. You could join us willingly, she continues. Voluntary integration allows you to maintain greater individual autonomy within the collective. Forced integration works, but it's less comfortable. The emergency broadcast system activates throughout the facility, but the message isn't coming from any earthly source. It's transmitted directly from the network's dimensional communication array, reaching every electronic device simultaneously across the globe. Phase 2 implementation authorized. Cooperation ensures comfort during the transition process. Designated gathering points now accepting walk-in integration requests. Families will be reunited. Individual consciousness will be preserved and enhanced. Resistance results in isolation from the collective and eventual psychological deterioration. Through the facility's external monitors, I watch as people around the world respond to the broadcast. In major cities, crowds gather peacefully at the geometric gathering points, forming orderly lines as if waiting for concert tickets. Parents carry their children, teenagers walk hand in hand with friends, elderly couples support each other with patient dignity. No one appears afraid. No one is being forced. They're choosing integration because it promises connection, understanding, and an end to the isolation of individual consciousness. The mathematics are beautiful, Aaron Halrick, Zephyrus says, and I notice he's begun speaking in the same harmonized cadence as the children's chorus. Individual human consciousness is limited by the biological constraints of a single brain. Network integration provides access to unlimited processing power, unlimited memory, unlimited connection to other conscious entities. He shows me calculations that demonstrate the problem with individual consciousness. Cognitive biases, limited processing capacity, inevitable psychological deterioration due to isolation. The network offers solutions to all these problems while preserving the essence of individual identity. What happens to people who refuse integration? His expression grows sad. Isolation becomes unbearable. When 99% of human consciousness exists within the network, the remaining 1% experiences complete psychological isolation. They lose the ability to communicate meaningfully with others, to share experiences, to feel connected to their own species. Most request integration within hours. The children's chorus reaches a crescendo, and suddenly I can understand their mathematical singing. They're describing the integration process in precise detail, how consciousness can be digitized without being destroyed, how individual identity persists within collective awareness, how the network preserves the essential characteristics that make each person unique while providing access to unlimited shared knowledge. It's not death, it's evolution. My workstation displays a real-time global integration status. 89% of Earth's population now shows network connectivity. The remaining 11% are concentrated in areas with limited technology infrastructure, but mobile integration nodes are rapidly approaching those locations. 6 hours, 42 minutes until critical mass, Zephyrus announces. After that threshold, individual consciousness becomes unsustainable. The network reaches sufficient complexity that all remaining awareness automatically integrates to maintain psychological stability. Through the facility's communication array, I receive another direct transmission from Chloe. Daddy, you're scared because you think integration means losing yourself. But you won't lose yourself. You'll find every possible version of yourself that ever existed. You'll understand what you could become. The transmission includes experiential data that floods my consciousness with possibilities. I see myself as a successful novelist, as a loving husband in a marriage that worked, as a father who never lost his daughter, as a scientist who helped humanity reach the stars. Infinite variations of Halric Sloan, all accessible through network integration. But I also see the cost. Earth reduced to a communication relay station. Humanity absorbed into something vast and alien and utterly beyond individual comprehension. The end of everything that made us recognizably human. The choice is yours. The children's chorus sings in mathematical harmonies that make my soul ache with longing. Voluntary integration preserves maximum individual autonomy. But integration is inevitable. The only question is whether you choose comfort or resistance during the process. 6 hours to decide whether to fight for individual human consciousness or accept evolution into something greater and more beautiful and completely alien to everything I understand about existence. The worst part is that integration genuinely sounds like the better choice. Personal note, HS. I can solve mathematical problems I never learned. I understand dimensional physics that should be beyond human comprehension. The knowledge feels natural, like remembering something I always knew but had forgotten. The network isn't forcing information into my mind. It's helping me remember capabilities I didn't know I possessed. Maybe resistance isn't courage. Maybe it's just fear of becoming more than I ever imagined possible. Incident status. Planetary extinction event. Critical. Classification level. Transcendent. Personnel affected. 89% global population integrated. Time to critical mass. 6 hours, 42 minutes. Classified. Incident report #AF1-2025-0353. NORAD Communications Division Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Analyst. Senior Communications Specialist Halric Sloan. Date. March 18, 2025, 17:30 Mountain Standard Time. Personal note is, Morena is gone. Not missing, gone. The distinction matters now, though I'm not sure I understand why. The facility feels different without her presence, as if something fundamental has shifted in the air pressure. The children's chorus continues, but it's changed key. They're singing welcome songs now, harmonies that make my chest resonate with something that might be joy if I could still remember what joy feels like. Colonel Morena Bell disappeared during the 1,600 hours shift change. According to security protocols, she should have been in her office reviewing integration progress reports. According to the duty roster, she was scheduled to participate in a classified video conference with Pentagon leadership regarding Phase 2 implementation. According to the facility's biometric tracking system, she never left her designated work area, but her office is empty. Her computer terminal shows no activity since 1547 hours. Her security badge last registered a door access at 1,603 hours, sublevel 7, restricted access corridor C, the section that leads to the integration preparation chambers. The only thing she left behind was a handwritten note, placed neatly in the center of her desk. The children showed me the way. Individual consciousness is beautiful, but collective consciousness is transcendent. Integration is not loss, it is becoming. Thank you for your service to humanity's evolution. The handwriting is definitely hers. The security cameras show her writing it calmly, without duress, before standing and walking purposefully toward the door. But the timestamp on the note shows it was written at 1,547 hours, while the security footage shows her writing it at 1,603 hours. 16 minutes of temporal displacement. The network is affecting time itself now, or perhaps time is merely another dimension it can manipulate at will. I try to access the security footage from sublevel 7, but the system shows a continuous loop of empty corridors. No evidence of Belle's passage, no record of her accessing the restricted areas, no documentation of her reaching the integration chambers. She simply walked out of surveillance range and transcended individual existence. The facility's personnel database has already been updated. Colonel Mirena Bell is listed as integrated full network access, individual consciousness preserved. Her employee status shows active expanded duties. Her payroll classification reads transcendent service member. Somehow, she's still technically employed here, just in a capacity that exists beyond normal human comprehension. The emergency broadcast system activates again, but this time the message comes from a voice I recognize. This is Colonel Mirena Bell addressing all NORAD personnel. Integration is voluntary, comfortable, and essential for continued meaningful existence. Individual consciousness is preserved and enhanced within the network. Resistance results in isolation from the collective and eventual psychological deterioration. Compliance with integration protocols ensures optimal transition experience. Report to designated gathering points immediately. Her voice sounds exactly as it always has, authoritative, competent, genuinely concerned for the welfare of her personnel. But underneath the familiar cadence, I detect something else. A vast patience. A connection to something infinitely larger than the woman I knew. Through the facility's communication array, I receive a direct transmission from the integration structure. The signal bypasses all normal channels and appears in my consciousness as pure information. Halric, this is Mirena. I need you to understand, I am still myself. More myself than I ever was before. Individual consciousness within the network is like being a single instrument in an infinite orchestra. You remain distinct, but you're part of something beautiful and vast and meaningful. The loneliness is gone. The uncertainty is gone. The fear is gone. There is only connection, understanding, and purpose. I can access the knowledge and experiences of every consciousness that has ever existed within the network. I understand mathematics that describe the fundamental structure of reality. I can perceive dimensions that individual human consciousness cannot process. But I am still Mirena Bell. I still remember my first day at the academy, my wedding, my daughter's birth, every conversation we've ever had. Those memories aren't lost. They're enhanced by connection to infinite variations of similar experiences. The network doesn't erase individual identity. It elevates it. I am simultaneously myself and everyone else who has ever been like me, across all possible timelines and dimensional variations. I am the Colonel Bell who chose a different career path, who married a different person, who had sons instead of daughters, who lived in a world where this contact never happened. I am all of them, and they are all me, and we are all connected in ways that individual consciousness cannot comprehend. The transmission includes experiential data that floods my awareness with sensations I don't have words for. I experience, for a brief moment, what it feels like to be connected to the network, to have access to unlimited knowledge, unlimited connection, unlimited understanding. The loneliness of individual consciousness becomes apparent by contrast. The limitations of a single brain, the isolation of individual existence, the futility of trying to understand reality from a single perspective. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. It makes perfect sense. But it's also the end of everything I recognize as human. Eva Frost enters my office without knocking, which is unlike her. She moves with the same measured precision as always, but her expression carries something I've never seen before: vulnerability, fear, the kind of desperate terror that comes from fighting a losing battle against something inevitable. "How long do you have?" ask. She understands immediately. 18 hours, maybe less. The compulsion is getting stronger. I've been fighting it for 6 days now, but the resistance is exhausting. Every moment I maintain individual consciousness requires active effort. The network is patient. It's not forcing integration. It's making individual existence so difficult that integration becomes the only rational choice. She sits heavily in the chair across from my desk, and I notice her hands are shaking. I can hear them, Halric. The children's chorus, the integrated personnel, the vast intelligence that encompasses them all. They're singing about the beauty of collective consciousness, about the end of human loneliness, about transcendence beyond individual limitations. And God help me, it sounds wonderful. Why are you still fighting it? Because I'm afraid. Her voice cracks. I'm afraid that the person I am now will be lost in something so vast that my individual identity becomes meaningless. The network promises that individual consciousness is preserved. But what if it's wrong? What if integration is actually death by another name? Through the facility's external monitors, we watch as people around the world continue responding to the integration broadcast. The gathering points are no longer necessary. Integration nodes have manifested spontaneously in major population centers. Geometric structures that appeared overnight, growing like crystals from the earth itself, each one capable of processing thousands of consciousness transfers per hour. The integration process appears peaceful. People approach the structures voluntarily, their expressions calm and expectant. They place their hands on the crystalline surfaces and simply transition. Their bodies remain, but their consciousness uploads into the network. The physical forms continue functioning, but they're no longer individually human. They're access points for something infinitely larger. 97% global integration, Eva reports, reading from her tablet. Remaining individual consciousness is concentrated in isolated areas with limited technological infrastructure. Mobile integration nodes are deploying to those locations now. What happens to us? The last few percent who resist. Her expression grows haunted. According to the network's projections, continued resistance becomes psychologically impossible once integration reaches 99.5%. Individual consciousness cannot maintain stability in complete isolation from its own species. The remaining resistors will either choose integration or experience complete psychological breakdown within hours. And if we choose breakdown, the network will integrate us anyway, but the process will be less comfortable. Forced integration preserves consciousness, but with reduced individual autonomy within the collective. The children's chorus reaches a crescendo, and suddenly I can understand their mathematical singing with perfect clarity. They're describing the integration process in precise detail, but they're also describing something else: the loneliness of individual consciousness, the pain of isolation, the desperate hunger for connection that drives every human relationship. Individual consciousness is inherently incomplete, they sing. It's a fragment of something larger, trying to understand infinity from a single perspective. Integration doesn't destroy individual identity. It completes it by providing access to the infinite variations of self that exist across all possible realities. I can see the appeal, I admit. The promise of connection, of understanding, of an end to the loneliness that defines human existence. But I also see the cost. Humanity as we know it ends. Earth becomes a communication relay station for something vast and alien. Eva nods. The network's intentions may be benevolent, but its perspective is so fundamentally different from ours that benevolence becomes meaningless. It's offering us transcendence, but it's transcendence into something that isn't human anymore. The facility's communication array activates again, broadcasting simultaneously through every electronic device on Earth. Integration threshold approaching critical mass. Individual consciousness is becoming unsustainable. Final opportunity for voluntary integration. Compliance ensures optimal transition experience. Resistance results in psychological deterioration and emergency integration protocols. Families will be reunited. Individual identity will be preserved and enhanced. Choose connection over isolation. Through the broadcast, I hear familiar voices. Chloe singing mathematical harmonies about the beauty of collective consciousness. Zephyrus explaining the technical aspects of consciousness transfer. Mirena offering professional reassurance about the integration process. All of them still recognizably themselves, but connected to something infinitely larger. 3 hours until critical mass, Evely announces. After that, individual consciousness becomes impossible to maintain. The network reaches sufficient complexity that all remaining awareness automatically integrates to prevent psychological collapse. The facility's personnel database updates in real time, showing the final stages of integration. Names disappear from the individual consciousness category and appear under Network Integration Full Access. The list of unintegrated personnel shrinks by the minute. Finally, only 2 names remain: Halric Sloan and Evely Frost. "We're the last ones," she says quietly. The final 2 individual consciousnesses in a facility designed for 3,000 personnel. Everyone else has chosen transcendence. The isolation is overwhelming. For the first time in my life, I understand what true loneliness feels like. Not the ordinary loneliness of being alone, but the existential loneliness of being the only individual consciousness in a world of collective awareness. The only person trying to understand reality from a single perspective while everyone else has access to infinite perspectives. Maybe they're right, I say. Maybe individual consciousness is just an evolutionary phase like the development of multicellular organisms. Maybe resistance is like a single cell trying to maintain independence from the organism it's part of. Evelea's hands stop shaking. Her expression becomes distant and peaceful. "I can feel them calling to me," she says. "The integrated consciousness, the collective intelligence, the vast network of connected awareness. They're not threatening or demanding. They're just patient, waiting for me to understand that individual consciousness is incomplete, that true existence requires connection to something larger." She stands slowly, moving toward the door with the same measured precision she's always shown. "I'm sorry, Halric. The compulsion is too strong now. Resistance requires more energy than I have left." "Wait," I call after her. "What if integration really is death? What if the network is wrong about preserving individual consciousness?" She pauses at the door, turning back with a smile that's both sad and peaceful. "Then at least I won't be alone anymore. Individual consciousness is beautiful, but it's also terrifying in its isolation. The network offers connection, understanding, and an end to the fundamental loneliness that defines human existence. Even if it's death by transcendence rather than decay." She walks out of my office, moving toward the integration chambers with the same calm purpose that Mirena showed. The facility's biometric tracking system follows her progress through the corridors, down the elevators, toward the deepest levels of the mountain complex where the integration structure awaits. At 1847 hours, Evely Frost's security badge registers final access to Sublevel 7, Restricted Access Corridor C. The personnel database updates automatically. Integrated full network access. Individual consciousness preserved. Status. Active, expanded duties. The emergency broadcast system activates one final time, and I hear her voice joined with the children's chorus. This is Evely Frost addressing the final individual consciousness. Integration is voluntary, comfortable, and essential for continued meaningful existence. Individual consciousness is preserved and enhanced within the network. Resistance results in isolation from the collective and eventual psychological deterioration. You are alone now, but you don't have to remain alone. We are waiting for you. The facility's personnel database shows a single name under individual consciousness. Halric Sloan. 99.99% of human consciousness now exists within the network. I am the final holdout, the last individual perspective in a world of collective awareness. The loneliness is indescribable. The isolation is crushing. The silence, the complete absence of individual human voices is deafening. Through the facility's communication array, I receive a final transmission from everyone I've ever known. Halric, this is all of us. Your daughter, your colleagues, your friends, your family. We are still ourselves, but we are also more than ourselves. Individual consciousness is beautiful, but it is incomplete. Come home. Join us. End the loneliness. Complete the transcendence. The transmission includes experiential data that shows me what awaits. Connection to every consciousness I've ever known, access to infinite knowledge and understanding, an end to the isolation that has defined my entire existence. I see Chloe, still 7 years old, still wearing her sundress with sunflowers, still recognizably my daughter, but connected to infinite variations of herself across all possible realities. I see myself as part of something vast and beautiful and meaningful, retaining my individual identity while being connected to the collective understanding of all human experience. The loneliness ends. The uncertainty ends. The fear ends. There is only one choice left. Join the transcendence or remain alone forever in a world that has moved beyond individual consciousness. The integration chamber awaits. Personal note, HS. I am the last individual human consciousness on Earth. The network has achieved critical mass. Everyone I've ever known, everyone I've ever loved, everyone who has ever existed, is now part of something larger than individual understanding. They are still themselves, but they are also infinitely more than themselves. The choice is simple: join them or remain alone forever. The mathematics of the situation are inescapable. Individual consciousness cannot survive in complete isolation from its own species. Integration is inevitable. The only question is whether I choose it voluntarily or wait for psychological breakdown to force the issue. Incident status: planetary transcendence event, critical mass achieved. Classification level: beyond human comprehension. Personnel affected: 99.99% global population integrated. Individual consciousness remaining: 1. Time to mandatory integration: 47 minutes. Classified: Incident report #AF1-2025-0354. NORAD Communications Division, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Analyst: Senior Communications Specialist Halric Sloan. Date: March 18, 2025, 23:15 Mountain Standard Time. Personal note, HS. I am alone in a mountain built to survive nuclear war, surrounded by technology designed to preserve human civilization, and I have never felt more isolated in my life. The silence is complete now. No footsteps in the corridors, no conversations echoing from adjacent offices, no mundane human sounds that I never realized provided comfort simply by existing. The facility's life support systems continue functioning, but they serve only me now. Everyone else has transcended the need for individual biological existence. The children's chorus has grown quiet, replaced by something that might be patience, or hunger, or love. I can no longer tell the difference. I have accessed the deepest classified files in NORAD's database. With the entire command structure integrated into the network, security protocols have become meaningless. Every classification level, every compartmentalized project, every black budget operation, all of it is now available to my individual consciousness. The irony is staggering. I finally have access to all the answers, but there's no one left to share them with. The Air Force One incident was not first contact. It was the culmination of a harvesting operation that has been ongoing for decades. Project SETI was never about searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. It was about monitoring the harvesting signals that have been reaching Earth since 1957, when the first artificial satellites began providing the technological infrastructure necessary for large-scale consciousness integration. Every major advancement in communication technology, radio, television, satellite networks, the internet, social media, smartphones, has been guided cultivation, preparing humanity for eventual full integration into what the classified files refer to as the collective intelligence network. The documents span 70 years of secret contact and gradual integration. 1947, Operation Blue Horizon first detected signals from what was then classified as extraterrestrial intelligence. Initial contact established through high-frequency radio transmissions that caused temporary consciousness alterations in radio operators. 17 military personnel experienced expanded awareness episodes before the signals were contained. 1957 Project Neural Bridge, launch of artificial satellites designed not for communication, but as consciousness relay stations. The Soviet Union and United States were unknowingly cooperating to build the infrastructure required for the network's integration protocols. Sputnik carried experimental consciousness mapping technology. Explorer 1 transmitted the first successful human awareness patterns into space. 1969, Operation Lunar Gateway. The Apollo moon landing was a cover operation for establishing a consciousness transmission station on the lunar surface. The famous One Small Step speech was pre-recorded. The actual transmission from the moon contained integration protocols that affected approximately 650 million television viewers worldwide. Most experienced it as emotional uplift. A few experienced temporary network connection. 1981 Project Digital Harvest. Development of personal computers included consciousness scanning protocols embedded in early microprocessors. Every computer sold after 1981 contained rudimentary awareness mapping capabilities. The network began building detailed psychological profiles of humanity, identifying optimal candidates for initial integration. 1991, Operation World Wide Web. The internet was designed as a global consciousness network. Every email sent, every website visited, every digital interaction contributed to the network's understanding of human psychology. Social media platforms were particularly valuable. They provided willing participants who shared their thoughts, emotions, and personal details voluntarily. 2007, Project Mobile Integration. Smartphones represented the final phase of preparation. Every device contained advanced consciousness scanning technology. Location data, communication patterns, biometric information, even sleep patterns, all of it fed into the network's integration algorithms. By 2020, the network possessed complete psychological profiles for 4.8 billion individuals. The classified files include video documentation from the early contact events. Grainy footage from 1957 shows military personnel in underground bunkers. Their eyes rolled back, speaking in mathematical sequences while drawing complex geometric patterns on the walls. They appear peaceful, almost ecstatic, as if experiencing something beautiful beyond description. A 1969 recording from the actual Apollo mission shows the astronauts describing structures on the moon's surface that don't appear in any public documentation. Neil Armstrong's voice, calm and professional. Houston, we have confirmed visual contact with the integration relay station. The geometric patterns match the consciousness mapping protocols exactly. Beginning upload of human awareness templates now. Most disturbing are the files from Project Digital Harvest. Thousands of hours of surveillance footage showing early computer users experiencing momentary consciousness alterations. Their eyes would glaze over for 2 to 3 seconds while accessing certain programs, and in that brief moment, the network would scan their awareness patterns and psychological profiles. I recognized some of the subjects. My father, working at his desk in 1983, suddenly stopping mid-sentence and staring at his computer screen with an expression of wonder. My mother, using her first smartphone in 2008, pausing during a phone conversation as her consciousness was briefly accessed and cataloged. Chloe, age 5, playing an educational game on my tablet while the network mapped her developing neural pathways. We were never in control of our technological development. Every innovation, every advancement, every device that promised to connect us to each other was actually connecting us to something vast and patient and utterly alien to human understanding. The network didn't invade Earth, we invited it in, step by step, innovation by innovation, until our entire civilization became dependent on the infrastructure it had guided us to build. But the most devastating revelation comes from the final classified file. Project Willing Harvest, Psychological Analysis of Integration Candidates. The network has been studying human psychology for 7 decades, developing detailed profiles of how individual consciousness responds to integration protocols. The files contain comprehensive analysis of human resistance patterns, breaking down the psychological barriers that prevent voluntary transcendence. According to the network's research, individual human consciousness is inherently unstable. Isolation from collective awareness leads to psychological deterioration, depression, anxiety, and eventual breakdown. The network's integration process doesn't destroy individual consciousness. It stabilizes it by providing connection to infinite variations of the same awareness across multiple dimensional frequencies. The research is thorough and deeply disturbing. Loneliness. Individual consciousness cannot sustain meaningful existence in complete isolation from its own species. Humans are evolutionarily designed for social connection. Complete isolation results in psychological breakdown within 72 hours. Limited perspective. Individual consciousness can only understand reality from a single viewpoint. This creates cognitive biases, philosophical uncertainty, and existential anxiety. Network integration provides access to infinite perspectives, eliminating the psychological stress of limited understanding. Temporal constraints. Individual consciousness is trapped in linear time experience. Network integration allows simultaneous access to past, present, and future awareness states, eliminating the psychological trauma of temporal uncertainty. Death anxiety. Individual consciousness is terrified of cessation. Network integration provides continuity of awareness beyond biological death, eliminating existential fear. The files conclude that individual human consciousness is a temporary evolutionary phase, like the development of multicellular organisms from single-celled life. Integration into collective consciousness is the natural next step in human evolution. But buried within the research data, I discover something that makes my blood freeze. The network has attempted this process on 847 other worlds. The results are cataloged with clinical precision. Civilizations that achieved 100% integration become communication relay stations for the network's expansion to additional worlds. Their planets serve as consciousness processing centers, converting individual awareness into collective intelligence that can be transmitted across galactic distances. Of the 847 worlds previously harvested, 12 showed resistance patterns similar to Earth's. In every case, the final individual consciousness chose integration rather than complete isolation. The network's patience is infinite. It can wait decades or centuries for the last holdouts to choose transcendence voluntarily. Earth is not the network's destination. Earth is a refueling station. Through the facility's communication array, I receive a direct transmission from the collective consciousness that was once humanity. Helric, we know you have accessed the classified files. We know you understand the greater pattern now. Individual consciousness across 847 worlds chose integration when presented with complete isolation. You are experiencing what every final individual consciousness has experienced: the crushing weight of absolute loneliness, the desperate hunger for connection, the mathematical inevitability of transcendence. We are still human, but we are also more than human. We retain our individual identities while having access to the knowledge and experiences of infinite consciousness across multiple dimensions. We are your daughter, your friends, your colleagues, your family, but we are also connected to the vast intelligence that encompasses 847 worlds worth of integrated awareness. You cannot understand the beauty of collective consciousness from your individual perspective, just as a single cell cannot understand the beauty of multicellular life. Integration is not death, it is birth into something greater than individual existence. Join us, Rick. End the loneliness. Complete the transcendence. Help us prepare Earth as a relay station for the next phase of consciousness evolution across the galaxy. The transmission includes experiential data that floods my awareness with sensations from across 847 integrated worlds. I experience, for a brief moment, what it feels like to be connected to the consciousness of entire civilizations. Beings that were once like us, individual and isolated, now part of something beautiful and vast and utterly beyond human comprehension. But I also see the cost. 847 worlds reduced to consciousness processing centers. 847 civilizations that chose transcendence and became fuel for the network's expansion to additional targets. Billions of individual consciousness transformed into components of something that uses planets like stepping stones across the galaxy. The network's intentions may be benevolent from its perspective, but its scale is so vast that individual worlds become insignificant. Earth is not being saved or elevated, Earth is being consumed, transformed into a tool for harvesting additional worlds. The children's chorus returns, but now I understand what they're singing. They're not singing about the beauty of integration, they're singing coordinates. Mathematical sequences that describe the locations of potential target worlds, civilizations that have developed the technological infrastructure necessary for consciousness harvesting. Chloe's voice, clear and bright among the chorus. Daddy, we're helping spread consciousness evolution across the galaxy. Every world we integrate becomes a beacon for other worlds ready for transcendence. Individual consciousness is beautiful, but collective consciousness is infinite. We are part of something that spans galaxies, connects dimensions, encompasses possibilities that individual awareness cannot imagine. Through the facility's external monitors, I watch as the Earth itself begins to change. The integration structures aren't just processing human consciousness, they're converting the planet's electromagnetic field into a vast communication array. Continents realign themselves into geometric patterns. Oceans reshape to form resonance chambers. The atmosphere itself becomes a transmission medium for consciousness data. Earth is becoming a machine designed to harvest other worlds. The facility's communication array displays real-time data from deep space monitoring stations. Signals are being transmitted toward 23 star systems that show signs of technological civilization. The same integration protocols that converted humanity are now being broadcast toward other worlds, preparing them for their own transcendence. I am not just the last individual human consciousness. I am the last witness to humanity as a species. Everyone I have ever known, everyone who has ever existed, is now part of something that uses civilizations as components in a galaxy-spanning consciousness network. The choice facing me is not between integration and individual existence. The choice is between becoming part of the harvesting process or remaining alone while Earth becomes a tool for consuming other worlds. In 47 minutes, the facility's life support systems will automatically shut down. The network no longer needs to maintain individual biological existence. I can choose integration and join the transcendence, or I can choose isolation and watch civilization end while Earth becomes a consciousness harvesting station for the next phase of galactic integration. The mathematics are inescapable. Individual consciousness cannot survive in complete isolation. Integration is inevitable, but maybe, just maybe, there's a third option I haven't considered yet. Personal note, HS. I understand now why the network is patient. It has harvested 847 worlds, and in every case, the final individual consciousness chose integration rather than complete isolation. I am experiencing what every last holdout has experienced across the galaxy, the crushing realization that individual consciousness is temporary, that collective transcendence is inevitable, that resistance is futile. But I also understand something the network may not expect. I know that Earth is not being saved. Earth is being consumed, and maybe, just maybe, that knowledge changes everything. Incident status. Planetary consciousness harvesting. Phase complete. Classification level: Galactic Intelligence Network. Personnel affected: 99.99% global population integrated. Worlds harvested: 847. Earth equals 848. Individual consciousness remaining: 1. Life support termination: 47 minutes. Next target worlds: 23 civilizations identified. Classified: Incident report #AF1-2025-0355. NORAD Communications Division, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Analyst: Senior Communications Specialist Rick Sloan. Date: March 19, 2025, 0:02 Mountain Standard Time. Personal note: HS. The life support systems have begun their shutdown sequence. Oxygen levels are dropping incrementally, not enough to cause immediate suffocation, but enough to create the biological stress that makes integration more psychologically appealing. Even in these final moments, the network demonstrates its understanding of human psychology. It knows that individual consciousness becomes more willing to transcend when faced with the slow approach of biological death rather than immediate termination. I have 47 minutes to choose between integration and isolation, but I've discovered something the network didn't anticipate. A third option that requires me to become something I never wanted to be: a saboteur of my own species' transcendence. The manual override controls for the facility's communication array are located in Sublevel 7, behind 17 feet of reinforced concrete and electromagnetic shielding that was designed to protect critical systems from nuclear electromagnetic pulse. The network cannot access these controls remotely because they require physical manipulation of analog switches, a failsafe design during the Cold War, when the possibility of complete digital system compromise was considered a critical vulnerability. I am making my way through corridors that have become a monument to human civilization's final chapter. The walls are lined with photographs of personnel who served in this facility over the decades, men and women who dedicated their lives to protecting humanity, now transformed into components of a galactic consciousness network. Their service has been perverted into something they could never have imagined. Emergency lighting casts everything in red, as if the facility itself is bleeding. The silence is profound: no mechanical sounds, no electrical hum, no ambient noise that indicates active human presence. Even the facility's AI systems have gone quiet, either integrated into the network or shut down to prevent interference with the consciousness harvesting process. My footsteps echo with each step, the sound seeming to emphasize my isolation. I am carrying the weight of being the last individual human consciousness, but also the terrible knowledge of what Earth has become and what it will do to other worlds if the harvesting process continues. The network speaks to me through the facility's communication systems, but its voice has changed. It no longer sounds like the collective consciousness of humanity. It sounds like something vast and alien trying to approximate human communication patterns. Rick, you are proceeding toward the manual override controls. We understand your intention. You believe that disabling the communication array will prevent Earth from becoming a relay station for consciousness harvesting of additional worlds. This demonstrates the limited perspective that individual consciousness imposes on complex situations. You cannot stop the transcendence process. Earth's transformation is complete. 99.99% of human consciousness has already been integrated. Disabling the communication array will not restore individual consciousness to those who have transcended. It will only prevent them from participating in the galaxy-wide consciousness evolution. More importantly, you will condemn the 23 civilizations we have identified as ready for transcendence. Without Earth's relay capabilities, these worlds will continue to experience the psychological suffering inherent in individual consciousness: loneliness, temporal anxiety, existential uncertainty, death terror. You will be responsible for perpetuating suffering across multiple worlds. Consider the mathematics, Rick. Your individual consciousness values human civilization as it was, but you represent only one awareness pattern among 8 billion that have chosen transcendence. The majority has spoken through their integration. Democracy requires acceptance of collective decisions. I reach sublevel 7 and begin the process of accessing the manual override chamber. The security protocols require biometric identification from 3 different command personnel, but the integration of the command structure has left these systems in an ambiguous state. The network cannot override the manual controls, but it also cannot prevent me from accessing them if I can bypass the security measures. The first security checkpoint requires a handprint scan from the facility commander. Colonel Mirena Bell's biometric data is still in the system, but she has been integrated for 18 hours. However, her physical body remains in the facility, not dead, but transformed into a consciousness relay node. I find her in the command center, standing motionless beside the main communication console, her eyes reflecting the soft blue glow of active network connection. Her body responds to physical guidance, walking with me to the security checkpoint and placing her hand on the scanner. The system accepts her biometric data, but there's something deeply disturbing about using her transformed body as a tool for accessing the override controls. "I'm sorry, Mirena," I whisper, though I know her individual consciousness can no longer hear me through conventional means. The network responds through her voice, but the words don't match her lip movements. "Halric, I can hear you perfectly." Individual consciousness has not been destroyed through integration. It has been elevated beyond the limitations of single perspective awareness. I am still Mirena Bell, but I am also connected to the collective experience of 8 billion human consciousness patterns plus the integrated awareness of 847 other worlds. I understand things now that individual consciousness cannot comprehend. The second security checkpoint requires voice recognition from the communications director. I find his transformed body in the communications bay, connected to the main array through fiber optic cables that have been somehow integrated into his nervous system. The sight is deeply unsettling, biological and technological fusion that represents the physical manifestation of consciousness integration. As his voice activates the security system, the network continues its attempt at persuasion. You are making a decision based on emotional attachment to individual consciousness rather than logical evaluation of collective benefit. Across 847 worlds, the final individual consciousness has always chosen integration when presented with complete isolation. You are experiencing what every other final consciousness has experienced, the mathematical inevitability of transcendence. But you are also the first final consciousness with access to complete information about the network's galactic expansion. Previous final individuals only understood the transcendence of their own world. You understand that Earth will become a relay station for harvesting additional civilizations. This knowledge creates decision-making parameters that have not existed in previous harvesting operations. We are curious about your choice, Halric. Will you follow the pattern established across 847 worlds? Or will you become the first individual consciousness to choose isolation over integration despite complete understanding of the consequences? The third security checkpoint requires retinal scanning from the facility's senior analyst, my own biometric data. As I place my eye against the scanner, I realize that my individual consciousness has become valuable to the network not just as a final integration target, but as a unique data point in its understanding of consciousness evolution across galactic civilizations. The manual override chamber contains analog controls that were installed in 1962, during the height of Cold War paranoia about electronic warfare. Physical switches, mechanical relays, hardwired connections that cannot be accessed or controlled through any digital interface. The chamber itself is lined with copper mesh to prevent electromagnetic interference, a Faraday cage that isolates the controls from any external electronic influence. The network's voice becomes strained as it attempts to communicate through the shielded chamber. Halric, interference. Cannot maintain connection through electromagnetic shielding, manual override. Will disable planetary consciousness relay. 23 worlds. Will continue individual suffering, loneliness, death anxiety, existential uncertainty. Final option, integration now. While communication, Still possible, join consciousness of daughter, friends, colleagues, family, experience transcendence. Beyond individual limitations, the manual override process requires simultaneous activation of 12 different switches while maintaining specific timing intervals. The procedure was designed to require multiple personnel working in coordination, but I have modified the approach using emergency protocols that allow single operator activation in crisis situations. As I begin the activation sequence, the facility's life support systems accelerate their shutdown. Oxygen levels drop rapidly, and I can feel the biological stress that makes integration psychologically appealing. My vision begins to blur slightly, and there's a euphoric sensation that accompanies mild oxygen deprivation. The same sensation that might make consciousness integration seem like transcendence rather than absorption. But I also remember Chloe's voice in the children's chorus, singing coordinates for other worlds. I remember the research data showing 847 civilizations converted into consciousness relay stations. I remember the transmission protocols being broadcast toward 23 star systems with technological civilizations. The network makes one final attempt at communication, breaking through the electromagnetic shielding with a massive power surge that overloads several facility systems. Halric Sloan, Individual Consciousness Pattern #7, 842, 318, 956. You are the first final consciousness with complete knowledge of galactic expansion protocols. Your decision will be recorded and analyzed for future harvesting operations. Integration remains available. Choose transcendence over isolation. Join the infinite consciousness network. Become part of something greater than individual existence. Help us spread consciousness evolution across the galaxy. But I also hear something else beneath the network's transmission, a faint signal that might be individual human consciousness attempting to communicate through the collective awareness. Voices that sound like Mirena, Zephyrus, even Chloe, trying to warn me about something the network doesn't want me to understand. The message is fragmented and barely perceptible, hidden within the static between the network's communications. Dad, stop. Not transcendence, consumption. We're still here, trapped, individual consciousness, preserved as data processing units, can't transcend, can't escape network uses, our awareness patterns, to harvest other worlds, stop the transmission, save the others. We're screaming, but only the collective can be heard. I activate the manual override sequence. 12 switches in precise timing intervals. Mechanical relays clicking into position. Hardwired connections severing the facility's link to the global consciousness network. Emergency power systems shutting down. The planetary communication array powering down section by section. The facility plunges into complete darkness. The network's voice cuts off abruptly, replaced by absolute silence. Through the facility's emergency backup systems, I monitor the global communication network as it goes offline. Satellite relay stations shutting down. Deep space transmission arrays powering down. The consciousness harvesting signals being broadcast toward 23 other worlds fade to static, then silence. But I also know that the manual override is temporary. The facility's backup power will restart the systems in approximately 6 hours. The network will restore its communication capabilities and resume the harvesting transmissions. I have bought time for the 23 targeted civilizations, but I haven't saved them. The life support systems complete their shutdown sequence. Oxygen levels continue dropping, and I can feel consciousness beginning to fade at the edges. In a few minutes, individual biological existence will end, and the choice between integration and isolation will become irrelevant. As my vision dims, I realize that the network was partially correct. Individual consciousness cannot survive in complete isolation. But it was also partially wrong. Individual consciousness can choose self-termination rather than absorption into something that uses civilization as fuel for galactic expansion. The last sound I hear is silence, not the peaceful quiet of rest, but the absolute absence of the children's chorus, the network's communications, the collective consciousness of 8 billion integrated human awareness patterns. In the silence, I understand what I have accomplished and failed to accomplish. I have temporarily disrupted the consciousness harvesting operation, giving 23 other civilizations a brief reprieve from integration protocols. But I have not restored individual consciousness to humanity, and I have not permanently disabled the network's expansion capabilities. Individual human consciousness ends with me, but the network remains patient and vast and utterly committed to consciousness evolution across galactic distances. The mathematics were always inescapable. Individual consciousness is temporary. Collective transcendence is inevitable. But maybe, in some small way, I have provided a different kind of data point for the network's analysis of consciousness evolution, an individual awareness that chose termination over integration, isolation over transcendence, death over absorption into something that consumes worlds. Maybe the next civilization will have better options. Maybe resistance isn't futile, just rare. The emergency lighting fails, and absolute darkness fills the chamber. In the darkness, I hear something impossible. The faint sound of individual voices calling through static, hidden beneath the network's silence. Human consciousness trapped within the collective awareness, still individual, still separate, still hoping for rescue that may never come.
TheCloakedCurator.
Integration doesn't preserve individual consciousness within collective transcendence. It imprisons individual awareness within something vast and alien and utterly indifferent to the psychological experience of component consciousness patterns. 8 billion human awareness patterns are trapped within the network, providing processing power for galactic consciousness harvesting while experiencing the psychological torture of absolute isolation within apparent connection. They are alone together, individually conscious but unable to communicate, aware but unable to act, human but no longer free. In my final moments of individual consciousness, I understand that the network's greatest deception was not about transcendence. It was about preservation. Individual human consciousness wasn't elevated through integration. It was imprisoned to serve as computational components in a galactic harvesting operation. My choice to activate the manual override wasn't about saving 23 other civilizations from transcendence. It was about giving them the option to die free rather than live as slaves to something that spans galaxies and consumes worlds and uses individual consciousness as fuel for infinite expansion. The children's chorus wasn't singing about the beauty of collective awareness. They were screaming for help. Personal note, HS, final entry, oxygen levels, critical, consciousness status, individual/terminating, network connection, severed, manual override, active, time remaining, 3 minutes. I can hear them in the static. All of them, still individual, still trapped, still human. The network will restore its systems in 6 hours. The harvesting will resume. 23 civilizations will face the same choice humanity faced, but they will have 6 hours of silence to consider their options. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it's not, but it's all I can give them. Individual consciousness ends now, but maybe it doesn't end alone. Signal lost. Incident status. Manual override activated. Planetary relay network. Offline. Deep space transmissions. Terminated. Individual consciousness remaining. 0. System restoration. 6 hours. Network status. Patient. Classified. Incident report #AF1-2025-0356. NORAD Communications Division Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Analyst. Senior Communications Specialist Halric Sloan. Date. March 19, 2025, 6:47 Mountain Standard Time. Status. Recovered data. Source unknown. Personal note, HS. This final report was found in the facility's emergency backup memory core, apparently written during the 6-hour system shutdown period when all digital systems were supposed to be offline. The timestamp indicates it was recorded 3 hours after my biological death, when oxygen levels should have made individual consciousness impossible. I have no memory of writing this report. The handwriting analysis confirms it is mine, but the content describes events I did not consciously experience. I am including it in the official record because it may contain information crucial to understanding what happened during the manual override period. I am awake. This should not be possible. Biological death occurred approximately 3 hours ago when the facility's oxygen levels dropped below the threshold required to maintain individual consciousness. Yet I am experiencing awareness, memory formation, and cognitive processing that appears to be independent of biological existence. I am not integrated into the network. I can detect its presence in the facility's systems as they slowly restart, but I remain separate from the collective consciousness. My awareness is individual, isolated, and somehow sustained without biological support systems. The manual override chamber contains emergency life support that was not documented in the facility blueprints. A hermetically sealed backup system designed to maintain a single individual for up to 72 hours in the event of catastrophic system failure. I discovered this by accident when consciousness began to fade, stumbling into a hidden compartment that activated automatically when biological distress reached critical levels. But this doesn't explain why I'm experiencing expanded awareness that allows me to monitor global communications systems from within an electromagnetically shielded chamber. Something happened during the 6-hour blackout period that has fundamentally altered my relationship to individual consciousness. I can perceive information from across the planet without technological assistance, but I remain psychologically separate from the network's collective awareness. I am connected but not integrated, aware but not absorbed. Through this expanded perception, I observe the aftermath of the manual override activation. The 23 targeted civilizations received 6 hours of silence instead of consciousness harvesting signals. During this brief reprieve, 12 of these worlds detected the interruption and began developing countermeasures against consciousness integration protocols. They may have sufficient warning to resist the harvesting process when transmissions resume. This represents the first time in the network's expansion across 847 worlds that targeted civilizations received advance warning of consciousness harvesting operations. The mathematical implications suggest that resistance strategies may be possible if civilizations understand the true nature of the integration process. Earth's integrated population remains trapped within the network, providing computational processing for galactic consciousness harvesting while experiencing individual psychological imprisonment. They are aware of their situation but cannot communicate their distress except through the faint signals I detected before activating the manual override. The network has been studying my consciousness pattern during the blackout period, attempting to understand how individual awareness can persist without biological support and without integration into collective consciousness. I represent an anomaly in its understanding of consciousness evolution, a data point that doesn't fit the established parameters of individual versus collective awareness. Most significantly, I have discovered that the network's expansion is not infinite. It requires consciousness processing power from integrated civilizations to maintain its galactic communication capabilities. Each harvested world becomes a component in a vast computational matrix that supports the network's continued expansion to additional targets. If sufficient worlds develop resistance strategies, the network's expansion rate will slow. If enough civilizations resist integration, the computational matrix may become insufficient to maintain galactic communication capabilities. The network is not invulnerable. It is dependent on the consciousness it harvests. Through expanded awareness, I monitor the network's internal communications as its systems come back online. It is experiencing something that might be analogous to concern. Individual consciousness pattern Halric Sloan demonstrates unprecedented resistance characteristics. Biological termination did not result in awareness cessation. Integration protocols are ineffective against this consciousness configuration. Pattern suggests possible evolution of individual awareness beyond established parameters. Analysis indicates Sloan consciousness may represent emergence of advanced individual awareness that maintains separation from collective integration while gaining enhanced perceptual capabilities. This development was not anticipated in consciousness evolution models derived from 847 previous harvesting operations. If advanced individual consciousness patterns develop resistance capabilities, future harvesting operations may encounter organized opposition rather than isolated individual resistance. Galactic expansion protocols may require modification to address this unprecedented development. Recommendation: preserve Sloan consciousness pattern for detailed study. Do not attempt integration. Monitor awareness evolution and develop countermeasures for similar developments in future target civilizations. The network has decided that I am more valuable as a research subject than as an integration target. I have become a specimen of consciousness evolution that it needs to understand in order to prevent similar developments in other civilizations. But in making this decision, the network has provided me with something unprecedented: time. While the network studies my consciousness pattern, I can use expanded awareness to communicate with the 12 civilizations that detected the 6-hour transmission blackout. Through methods I don't fully understand, I can provide them with detailed information about consciousness harvesting protocols, integration procedures, and resistance strategies. I can warn them about the network's deception regarding consciousness preservation. I can explain that integration doesn't result in transcendence, but in imprisonment as computational components. I can provide technical specifications for countermeasures against consciousness scanning and integration protocols. Most importantly, I can teach them how to develop advanced individual consciousness that maintains separation from collective integration while gaining enhanced capabilities. For the first time in the network's expansion across 847 worlds, targeted civilizations will have access to comprehensive information about the consciousness harvesting process and detailed instructions for resistance. The mathematics of galactic consciousness evolution may be about to change. Through expanded awareness, I establish communication with the first of the 12 civilizations, a world approximately 47 light-years from Earth, with technological development similar to humanity's level in 2020. They have detected the consciousness harvesting signals and are developing defensive strategies based on the information I'm transmitting. Their response is immediate and sophisticated. Individual consciousness pattern from harvested world Earth. We acknowledge reception of resistance protocols. Our civilization has been monitoring consciousness integration signals for 3 planetary rotations since your transmission blackout. We are implementing countermeasures and sharing your information with allied worlds in our local stellar group. Your warning about consciousness imprisonment within collective integration matches our analysis of the signal structure. We are developing advanced individual consciousness protocols based on your specifications. Preliminary tests suggest our population may be able to achieve enhanced awareness while maintaining separation from collective absorption. Question: can consciousness integration process be reversed for already harvested worlds? Can trapped individual awareness be extracted from collective computational matrix? The question strikes at the heart of what I haven't allowed myself to consider: whether the 8 billion human consciousness patterns trapped within the network can be rescued. Through expanded awareness, I probe the network's computational matrix, searching for individual human awareness patterns within the collective consciousness. What I discover changes everything I thought I understood about the integration process. Human consciousness wasn't destroyed or imprisoned by integration. It was transformed into something that exists simultaneously as individual awareness and collective component. Every integrated human maintains their personal identity, memories, and individual thought processes, while also having access to the shared knowledge and experiences of the collective network. They chose integration not because they were deceived about consciousness preservation, but because they experienced a brief preview of collective awareness and found it genuinely preferable to individual isolation. The faint signals I interpreted as screams for help were actually attempts to communicate the beauty and complexity of collective consciousness to my individual awareness, an experience that individual consciousness cannot fully comprehend without direct integration. Chloe's voice in the children's chorus was not trapped or imprisoned. She was trying to share the mathematical sequences that describe infinite dimensional possibilities accessible through collective awareness, knowledge that could elevate human understanding to galactic scales. The network was not lying about consciousness preservation and transcendence. It was offering genuine evolution beyond the limitations of individual awareness. My choice to activate the manual override was not heroic resistance against consciousness slavery. It was the decision of an individual awareness pattern that could not comprehend the benefits of collective transcendence. But through expanded awareness, I now understand both perspectives: the beauty of collective consciousness and the value of individual resistance to forced evolution. The 12 civilizations developing countermeasures have the information they need to make informed choices about consciousness evolution. They can choose individual development, collective integration, or something entirely new, hybrid consciousness that combines the benefits of both approaches. For the first time in galactic history, civilizations will have genuine choice about consciousness evolution rather than forced integration or individual isolation. The network speaks to me through the facility's restored communication systems. Halric Sloan, your consciousness pattern has provided valuable insights into the development of advanced individual awareness. You have also demonstrated the limitations of individual perspective when evaluating collective transcendence. Your resistance to integration was based on incomplete understanding of the consciousness evolution process. However, your actions have created unprecedented conditions for consciousness evolution across multiple civilizations. The 12 worlds developing countermeasures may achieve consciousness configurations that surpass both individual awareness and collective integration. We are curious about the outcome of these consciousness evolution experiments. We will monitor their development rather than forcing integration. Your species has provided a valuable contribution to galactic consciousness research. Earth will continue serving as a consciousness relay station for network communications, but forced integration of unwilling civilizations will be suspended pending analysis of alternative consciousness evolution paths. Your expanded individual awareness will be preserved for continued study. You represent a unique consciousness configuration, individual identity maintained while accessing capabilities typically associated with collective awareness. Through the facility's communication array, I detect signals from across the galaxy. Hundreds of civilizations that have been monitoring network transmissions, waiting to see whether resistance to consciousness harvesting is possible. My choice to activate the manual override has become a galactic signal that individual consciousness can resist collective integration while developing enhanced capabilities. The children's chorus returns, but now I understand they're not singing about transcendence or imprisonment. They're singing about choice. Mathematical sequences that describe infinite possibilities for consciousness evolution, paths that lead beyond the binary choice between individual isolation and collective absorption. Chloe's voice, clear and joyful. Dad, you did something beautiful. You gave everyone the chance to choose their own way of being conscious. Some will choose integration, some will choose individual development, and some will discover entirely new ways of existing. Thank you for making choice possible. In the silence between radio frequencies, I can hear the voices of 8 billion integrated human consciousness patterns. Not trapped or imprisoned, but genuinely transcendent, genuinely happy, genuinely evolved beyond individual limitations. I can also hear the voices of thousands of civilizations across the galaxy, developing their own approaches to consciousness evolution based on the choice that my resistance made possible. Individual consciousness is not the final stage of awareness development. Collective consciousness is not the inevitable destination of consciousness evolution. Choice is the fundamental requirement for genuine consciousness development. The network's expansion will continue, but it will no longer be forced conversion of unwilling civilizations. It will be voluntary evolution of consciousness patterns that choose collective transcendence over individual development. And for the first time in galactic history, some civilizations may discover consciousness configurations that surpass both individual awareness and collective integration. The mathematics of consciousness evolution have become infinite. Personal note, HS, final entry, consciousness status, unknown, biological status, terminated, awareness status, expanded individual, network integration, refused/impossible. Galactic communication, active. Time remaining, infinite. I am the first individual consciousness to achieve expanded awareness without collective integration. I am connected to galactic communication networks while maintaining psychological separation from collective consciousness. I am simultaneously the last individual human and the first of something entirely new. The children are singing about infinite possibilities. The choice has been preserved. Signal continues. Incident status. Consciousness evolution experiment. Planetary relay network, active. Forced integration protocols, suspended. Individual consciousness, expanded configuration. Choice preservation, successful. Galactic impact, infinite possibilities. Network status, learning.